Welcome, everyone, to the next episode of the Outsider Podcast. Today, we have a very special guest, Willie Robertson. He is the founder of Buck Commander, CEO of Duck Commander, New York Times best-selling author, and today we're here to talk about his new book, Gospeller. Mm-hmm. Could you tell me what a Gospeller is?
It is simply someone who shares the gospel with other people, publicly or personally. Interesting word. I had never heard of it. I was writing this book about kind of tips on sharing your faith with other people and having conversations. And I had some other names that I thought it would be. And my wife, actually, she came in, she said, I found this word. It's so cool. It's called Gospeller. And it was an old word that used to be really common, like in language. I even found like a law where it was like, no one can stop a priest or known Gospeller from preaching on the street corner or something. So it was like in vocabulary, and then like a couple hundred years ago, and then it's just gone. In fact, I don't think I've run into anybody who's ever heard of the word. But if you look it up, it's like it's an old word that was in America and also in England. And I thought that's cool. That's the word I'm going to use. So kind of bring it back and in an attempt to just make an impression on culture and just have some positive conversations. And then the tagline, and I was searching for what the tagline should be for it, and it's turning darkness into light, one conversation at a time. And kind of the genesis of that was we have and you'll understand this, so we have a new optic line coming out this fall for Buck Commander, and we got this cool technology. So like when you're hunting, so you're still legal where you can still shoot, but you're losing light quickly. And so we've got this optic where you can click a button, and when I tell you it goes dark to light, it's daylight. It's crazy, the technology that we have. And so I was looking at the mock-up of the marketing material, and it said turn dark to light, and it had all these cool pictures and visually, and I was like, that's it. That's the subtitle for my book. So it was actually a business project I was working on. And then I said, I'm going to call it Turning Darkness to Light, one conversation at a time. And so, yeah, that's kind of where the subtitle came from and where the title came from.
That's great. Now the two are tied together forever.
Yeah.
So instantly got sideread when you started talking about optics. Does it change the objective lens to let more light in? Does it grow? Or, I mean, I don't want to give away your trade secrets. I'm just curious.
Well, I don't really know how it works. But what you're actually doing is looking at a screen. So it's a little different. It's not like it's not like you're putting your eye up to it. Mm-hmm. You're kind of a little bit further back, and you're looking at a screen, and it doesn't use infrared. It's not that, and so it's legal. It's just pulling. I don't know how it's pulling this light.
My guess is it works off similar technology to night vision, where it's capturing as much ambient light as possible in the objective lens and allows you to see it. Is this mounted?
But it's not green. It's it's.
Is it white phosphorus? Does it look grainy at all?
No, it looks like daylight. I mean, and you can see colors. That's the thing. You can see the green grass. You can,
Yeah.
And so what it is, it's going to put your where your target spot is. So it's going to put that in where you're actually aiming. But it's amazing. Yeah, I'll show you it's crazy.
Mounted on top of the weapon system, like a regular scope.
Well, we've got it on a crossbow. Yeah, that's what we're.
Gotcha.
So we use, but we also have. A version where you can just look, you can just look and you can see, because it's kind of like, because I've been out there a lot of times when animals will come in at that spot. Again, it's still legal shooting light, but I can't really tell, is that the one I'm after? Is that the buck? And so you can certainly identify what it is that you're trying to shoot. So this will be the first year. We used them just a little bit last year. We got kind of some models in just in time to actually go out and check it out and see what it would be like, but I actually haven't pulled the trigger myself, And
when does this come out?
Got one. It's out this fall.
Oh, yeah. I can't wait.
Buck Ops, it's going to be Buck Ops. It's a line of optics that we've been developing. And I remember when I first saw the technology that we looked at, and it was like a skyline, like somewhere in Asia, and it was just night, it's going through the buildings, and they make a click, and it turned to day.
So. Interesting. I'd love to see
I
that.
figured y'all had some of that stuff. I figured y'all were doing
In the teams?
some early stuff. Yeah,
And the SEAL
some
team?
of the
I mean,
early.
shit, we got everything out there on the moon. Yeah, can I afford that? No.
Well, we've made it affordable, so now you can.
When I first started hunting, it wasn't necessarily if I can age the deer. I was really worried about seeing my crosshairs, so I was more concerned with an illuminated reticle. And now that I can age deer and I know about young deer versus mature deer and which deers I want to take off the farm and so on and so forth. That's the main hindrance is it's too dark to age this deer. See which one is that.
Right.
So I think that's extremely important.
So this will give you that that advantage, just another advantage to at least being able to identify what it is that you're after. By the way, is there supposed to be another person here, or is it?
Yeah,
I was
his name rhymes with Jay Cutler.
Yeah, well, I was so confused. That's kind of what I mean. I finally made it to Nashville. We've had this conversation a lot. I'm here. You're here.
Well,
he's not here. What's the deal?
First of all, I'm going to apologize on his behalf.
I wondered if it was going to even come up.
The whipping post. He's out in Montana for spring bear, and he has Starlink out there. So he's like, "Hey, perfect, no drama." The Starlink got left out after his last trip, and he was having trouble getting it working. So then he decided, "Hey, no drama. I'll drive to the top of the hill in the Gator and use my Wi-Fi hotspot." And call in. On his way to the top of the hill, he got a flat tire. So I think as we speak, he's walking to the top of that hill.
Oh, okay. So somehow in this wacky world, I'm here in a studio. He's hunting, and I'm doing basically his job.
Yeah.
While he's hunting, so that's the world we're living in right now.
You do well enough. He might just stay out there. You move right down the road and go off together and shoot some stuff.
There you go.
So, your book came out today.
Today, yeah. Today's the day.
Last night, I made the decision to go to bed vice waiting till midnight because I didn't know what time it would drop. I don't know if it was just going to drop at midnight or 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning. So I went to bed, then woke up real early and downloaded it. And I think I'm about halfway through it. And I would like to talk about the first chapter and Swamp Dweller.
Swamp Dweller. So all the chapter titles rhyme with Gospeller. Gospeller, Swamp Dweller.
Yep. And Propeller. That's another good
Rogue
one.
Propeller.
Yeah.
Storyteller.
Yep.
That was fun, yeah. It was a little difficult. 8 of them were fairly easy. A couple of them were a little bit tougher. I had to go to some more obscure words.
So in the chapter 1, I believe it was Swamp Dweller, you told the story of your father, how he was, down and out and living in Arkansas. And it's an incredible sequence of events, what happened and how then you and Corey ended up together and the person who saved your father. Could you elaborate on that a little?
No, yeah,
Tell us
for
a little
sure.
bit about that?
I mean, the heart and the crux of the book really is that first chapter. That's what kind of started the whole thing. We made a movie about it last fall called The Blind. And it was a story of mom and dad kind of coming to their faith. Because we've told the story a lot and they have as well, but watching it in pictures was really difficult. And we actually made the movie. So this was one we had to get right. It was our first movie to make. And, but it was just such an incredible story. And I don't think people realize how close this all came to not happening at all. Like considering Duck Dynasty and everything that came out of it, is if you go back 50 years, that thing was almost over. Or, I mean, for all practical purposes, it was over. So Dad was a gifted athlete. They were really poor growing up, 7 siblings, and he ended up getting a scholarship to Louisiana Tech to play football, where he played quarterback. There was another young guy behind him called Terry Bradshaw, who ended up becoming Terry Bradshaw. And so I don't know. Obviously, I wasn't around when Dad was playing football, but I guess if you're the starter and Bradshaw's your backup, I guess it means you're good because Bradshaw was the number 1 pick in the NFL draft. So, but Dad, talking about sports and stuff, he never really, he said, I just didn't have the right mentality. That's what he would say. I didn't have that jock mentality. So he kind of was using that to get his education, but he really just didn't have the heart for it. And so he ended up quitting, and he was kind of troubled in a way. Got his degree, was married super young. Mom was still in high school. They had my brother, and they end up in Junction City, Arkansas, which is a little tiny little spot just around El Dorado, Arkansas, which is around the border of Louisiana. And that's where he kind of was going to live his life, and he was coaching, teaching, and then his life just went out of control in a really bad way. And so he ultimately got fired from his job. He was cheating on mom. He's pretty violent too. He was just not a good dude at all. And so he ends up leasing a bar. That's what he was going to do in life. And so it's kind of like, when I think about it, it's like all this just wasted talent. It's like he had so much to going for him, and then he just kind of threw it all away. And so he ends up kicking mom out of the house with us. I'm born at the time. And so we all get kicked out and have to find somewhere to live. And that's how we ended up in Louisiana. She moved there, and Dad was just kind of a miserable guy up there, leasing his bar. Now his family's gone. The one person that never gave up on Phil, because at this point, Mom couldn't really help him or minister to him. And I think she had just found her faith as well, and was Dad's sister, his younger sister. And she was a real holy roller, and she was, she's passed away, and sadly, she didn't even get to see the movie. But, man, she was all about sharing the gospel. She was a gospeler for sure. And so she would go up there and like bug the mess out of him and pass out Bible tracts, around the bar. And that was always kind of get on Dad's nerves. But she begged this preacher. There's this preacher in West Monroe, and she begged him. She said, "Will you please go share the gospel with my brother? It's pretty much the last chance he has to turn his life around." And man, that guy got in his car, drove to a bar, walked in. This was adversarial. Phil wasn't wanting this at all with his little Bible. And now I was able to meet I knew the preacher well as I grew up. And he told me the story. He said, I walked in, he said, your dad's sitting there, he's got a pistol in his belt. And this was and the bar was like, the back was African Americans, the front was the white people, and Phil said I was in the middle. I was the line of the law, and so he had his pistol and he's got this giant Budweiser. And the preacher looks at him, and Phil looks at him and says, "What you selling, preacher?" So it's a pretty intimidating, because Phil's a scary guy. He was super scared. I'm still scared of him, honestly. And so the guy sits down, shares his faith, and shares the gospel with Phil. Nothing really happens. There wasn't like some big barroom moment. Phil just said, "I'll keep that in mind." And it wasn't until Phil then got himself even into more trouble. He put 2 people in the hospital. Now he's wanted by the police. The police shows up. He goes and lives in the woods for 6 months, I think.
Really?
Like hiding out from the law. Yeah. So that's the movie was portraying all these stories the best we could, because we didn't know a lot about what he was doing out in the wood, but he was pretty much just hiding out from the police. And he was definitely wanted. So it wasn't until he got to that moment where he was like, my whole life's over. And that's when he drug back up and wanted to go talk to that preacher again. He said, maybe there is something to this, because I've tried it my way. And so then he ends up giving his life to God at 27 years old, 28 years old. And then he goes back to Mom, and thankfully she takes him back. And so we end up in Louisiana running from the police. So they end up years later, decades later, Phil got an award. It was like Arkansas Traveler of the Year, and I thought, we left here running from the police, and now he's being honored. And they said, we've dropped all those charges that were against you. So now think about this. My life, so when I'm now like 3 years old, that's how I grew up. And when Phil went from darkness to light, he went all in. He's pretty much all in guy. And so he just started absorbing the Bible, and he wanted to teach, and he wanted to tell other people, especially lost people. He kind of got the knack for that. So he had this thing where he wanted to talk to people and try to get them out. So he just starts preaching to people all the time. And so growing up, I just watched him I was like, almost every night of the week. He was just in the living room or down there, and we lived on the banks of a river. He'd go out there and baptize. I mean, I don't know, thousands of people he's
Really?
baptized in that river. Yeah. So I watched that, and it made such an impression on me just watching someone live that out who had, like, again, I didn't see all the bad, but I obviously knew it was there. But think about if that doesn't happen. So now let's go back to, if that dude doesn't go up there, if he's like, no, because, and I really go through that in the book, like, because think about preachers, like, he wasn't going to go to his church. He wasn't even in the same state. This guy drives across state lines. This guy has no money. He's not like somebody's like, oh, we want this guy in our church. This is a scary guy. So he really only did it because he wanted to share the gospel with this guy, and dad's sister wanted that. And my dad's sister told the preacher, if you convert him, he'll convert 1,000. Like, she said that. Now, how would she know that?
Yeah,
like, how would she even know?
His personality, his demeanor,
she saw
his
something, man.
ability to influence.
She had something that where she saw that. She kind of caught that vision, which was true. So then I started thinking about, because the whole thing is like your gospel genealogy. And so we got caught up in, like, because I wanted to find out, like, where did I come from? Where's my heritage? So we traced it back to, Scotland and, the Robertsons and all this. And then I thought about how you have this genealogy. If you're a believer, where did that start? And so for us, that's where it started. And then you think about all the things that we ended up doing and are still doing, so many ways of touching people with the gospel. So you have the TV show, hundreds of millions of people watch, not just in America, all over the world, where it ends in a prayer. So that's just another testament to what happened back when they were this couple. And then we ended up at, like, things like church, which that was new. I ended up at a church camp, which is where I met my wife. So I wouldn't have been there. None of that stuff would have happened. I would have grown up a single parent, and my life would look completely different. And so, I mean, all the way up to today, to sitting here talking to you on this podcast, all of that has been influenced by that decision that was made, and I can trace it back to two people. So I can look back at that, and I can be so appreciative, which is why I'm passionate about that, because everything I feel like we owed it to that. Had it not been for the gospel, had it not been for that, their marriage was over. And but I can also look forward, and I can think, well, man, if I tell somebody, and if someone changed their life, which can affect their life, it can affect their marriage, it can affect their children, how their children are raised, perhaps who their children marry, what their life looks like. Now you're talking about generational change, and it still comes back to one conversation that somebody had. And so, I mean, as you look at these things, that this message was spread for now around 2,000 years. It's been spread by people, and which is amazing how they spread the gospel at the time, 2,000 years ago. There's no internet. There's no, there's no books. There was no way to get, there was no money. They weren't famous or anything. So it's just like something happened. And then that's how it affected my life and our life. And you can see the results. Even my daughter, like, she's all over the world and has millions of followers. And so
she's doing great.
That's just another testament to, like, I can trace it back to this little couple in Junction City, Arkansas. So that's kind of the heart of where this comes out of what the power of the gospel is new in one conversation, and how much it can change people's lives.
Now, you ended up, that gentleman that went and talked to your father, the gospeler, you ended up being related to him now, correct? Through marriage? Did I get, is that?
No, not exactly him. So, yeah. So the church that had hired him, so he was a preacher, right, of this church. The church who had hired him, one of the founders of the church, who basically had put a lot of the money into the church, who was really successful at business, was my wife's grandfather.
Oh, okay. I got that mixed up.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was my wife's grandfather.
That's what I was reading it this morning. I'm like, man, what a, sequence of events. I thought you were into being, related to that gentleman by marriage.
No, there was even, we show this on the movie too, which is really interesting. When mom ended up in West Monroe, when she leaves, when dad kicks us out and the marriage is over, the job she got, so the church took her in and said, we'll help you set us up to live somewhere in an apartment. And she was hired by my wife's grandfather and father at their company. So they're the ones who gave her the job initially. And they had a little daughter and
Yep.
a little son. And who would have thought we would have ended up getting married? They also started that church camp that I met my wife at.
In the
And
fourth grade?
That's the one they started. Yeah, that's the camp they started. So
That's a story.
And now my son runs that camp. That's what I did. That was my first job in my 20s. I ran that camp, that same camp we met at. And now my son's running that camp as well. So yeah, it's a small town, but it's not that small.
Yeah.
It's not super tiny.
What was childhood like growing up in West Monroe on the riverbanks?
It was awesome, man. We were really poor. We didn't have any money, but we didn't know we were poor. Like we thought we were the happiest little kids ever. We were we were just so appreciative that our family was together and that, that was awesome. Because we knew, which my older brothers, they saw it. So now it was just like this real appreciation. Hey, mom and dad are together and, that they're happy and dad's fired up for the Lord. Mom was doing great. We were pretty much dad's job at that point. Once he moved to West Monroe, we moved down by the river. And part of that was just hiding out from all the old friends. He just had to get away.
Okay.
This is no internet. This is no cell phones. Like it was really hard to track somebody down. And we were down there where it was kind of hard to find you, end of a dead end street that was on the banks of the river or in the river some of the time. And Dad fished commercially. That's what we did. The duck call was kind of an idea, and he was doing that in a small scale, like trying to figure out how to sell more of those. But mostly what we did, where we got our money, was from the river. So he had hundreds of nets, hoop nets, and
what was he
trammel
fishing
nets.
for?
Catfish, buffalo, pretty much everything. We'd sell anything we could sell legally. So catfish were kind of the king. You got 70 cents a pound for those.
There you go.
30 cents a pound for buffalo. You could sell goo and, some of the trashier fish. You could still sell those. Gar, you could even sell gar. So we'd go. So the way it would work is Jace was older. Jace was the motor man, so he ran the motor, and Phil would be at the front of the boat. Pretty dangerous work too. With the currents and stuff, and they would go out and catch a load of fish. And
so this is a family event.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
Oh yeah, they bring them in, and so the boat would come, and we would know because we would hear it. So it's funny. There was no cell phones. So it's like you could hear the boat coming in. We knew about the right time. So then I would go down, and Mom would back the truck up to the bank, and Jason and I would carry all the fish in the tubs, and we'd separate them all, bust up ice. So we never bought ice. I remember the first time I bought ice, I was like, this is crazy. Who buys ice? Because we made it. Like we would have jugs. Like every empty jug would be filled with water, and then we would take a cleaver and we'd bust them all up on our fish. And then Mom and I, because I was younger, we would head up to town to sell the fish. And so we would hit all the fish markets. There was about 3 that we would hit, and hopefully they would just take them and you'd be done for the day. But occasionally they wouldn't take all your fish. And so then we would head to the street corners and put up signs, fresh fish. And we would sell them which is kind of where I got the knack of selling stuff, because I was like selling them fish on the corner.
That's I did not know it was that much of a family event. I think that's super cool. Family owned business.
Yeah, we did even in Duck Commander, we did all the work. We dipped the duck calls, we folded the boxes, we did all the work, packaging. I answered the phone. I mean, I did every job at Duck Commander, customer service, because it was our home phone line was the company line. So somebody call like, hey, I want to order a duck call. I'd be like, yeah, no problem. I mean, I'm like 8 years old. I'm like, get a paper plate, and I'm writing on the back of it, what do you want? I need one of these and an extra reed, and give me your address. And we get a credit card number, write it down, and then we would charge it. And then we'd put it up on Mom's desk, and then they would ship them out the next day just from the living room.
That's amazing.
We'd pack them up.
so obviously you started duck hunting at a very young age, and duck hunting is what I've noticed. When I started hunting, I started by duck hunting. My father wasn't into hunting. However, my best friend down the road, his dad was a big time duck hunter. So that was my introduction into hunting, is duck hunting. And as I grew older, and was in the Navy, I leaned more towards, that's when I really got into deer hunting and, bear hunting and things like that. And I've been duck hunting a couple times since, but now looking at it, objectively, duck hunting, that's just a culture in its own. People will do anything and go to any links or spend money and flood fields. People, it's an addiction.
Yeah.
Yeah. And do you still...
I'm not as,
Okay.
yeah, it's not as, I love deer hunting way more.
Me too.
I love the, I'm always joking, so I can eat longer on a deer than I can a duck. So, something about deer, they're, it's more limited. So like you're going after the one, so it's a little bit more like ducks. They just keep coming and they're all the same, and so, you're trying to get that limit. But I like the going after something and pattern it and when's it coming in and when it's slicked you,
a target buck typically?
Oh yeah. No matter where you're going, you generally, you've got, I do it a lot. So it's like I go to a lot of different places. So, and I'm not like I don't hunt like the dudes up and down my street do, because they have their places and they hunt their deer and, because mine's more travel. I'm like a vagabond, I'm in Arkansas, then I'm in Kansas, then I'm in Missouri, and so it's I'm trying to get footage and trying to.
Where's your favorite place?
And video and deer, and hunting deer, video and deer it's two different things, man. If I didn't video, I would kill way more deer. But there's lots of times we don't, and like you go to a state and you've only got one deer, so you can't, you like we're talking about you mess up and screw it up, you're done, and you come a long way and spend a lot of money to get that. So yeah, a little bit different, when it's as a business, and part of that's what kind of I'm a little different, even duck hunting, even growing up, because it was business, like it wasn't a hobby. It was a passion of life, but it was so tied into business. And so, especially when we started video and everything, because then it was just different, and Dad was hardcore. And so I had a little of that kind of, hunting with Dad was kind of like, oh guys, like it was so much pressure, like it wasn't like Dad and his son, hey, why don't you take the next shot? No, that was not the case. It was sit over there, shut up. And we never had like Dad's not the most, compassionate person, so like I feel like I never had the right stuff, like I never had the right gear, and I was always freezing, and so Dad was like, hey, be a man. So I'm like, I'm freezing, as a little kid. I remember one time we went dove hunting and we were excited, we were like, we're gonna go dove hunting, and obviously Dad didn't make the right appropriations for what was needed. I had one shell for a dove hunt. I had one, I stayed there all day, like waiting for my right moment. And so I finally took a shot and the dove fell. I was so excited. I was like, and I looked out and Dad had shot the same exact time I did with my one shell. So he kind of helped in that. So yeah, it was just a little different, and then by the time I started getting older, really getting into the video, and Jay's kind of had that passion. So, and so I never really saw myself working there. I was like, I'm out of here. I'm like, I'm going to go do something else. And so I never dreamed I would actually work back for the family business. I really was like, I'm going to go do something else. And came back. So I came back when I was about 30. That's when I came back to the business. And because really in my 20s, there wasn't even enough room there for me to work. It was still so small. It was like, I think people thought it was way bigger.
What made you come back?
Well, I had kind of done some other things and kind of found myself and kind of what I wanted to do. And so I kind of looked at the family business, and I was able to, in the strange way, I could see it from afar, like as an outside person. And then I'd been inside of it, and obviously I knew Dad and all that. And I thought, man, there's something here. Like I could just tell the way people reacted to Dad. And so when I came back down, because my wife, their family business was very successful, but I didn't necessarily want to work for them. I was like, I don't want to, it was a little, I didn't want to do that. But they knew a lot. They knew a lot about business. And And I thought, we've got a business. We've got, this could be big. And so it's like, it's kind of all been formed. Dad's done a lot of the heavy lifting. If we just kind of maybe ran it differently and kind of connected some more dots, I think we could do this. So the first thing I did was I would follow Dad. Dad would go speak, and we would sell duck calls. And so I would pack them up like in suitcases, and he would be up there giving like a duck call demonstration. A lot of these like wild beast feast, church things too, because Dad was kind of known for preaching, and then I would be in the back selling stuff. So I just did that and really just watched and observed him and listened to his message. It was always a lot of what's in that book. So it was a lot of that, but then also hunting and just kind of learned how to tell stories. That was, I think we were always good storytellers. And that was from growing up where we did not a lot of TV. We had 3 channels, but it was pretty much whatever Dad and Mom watched. We had to, watch it, or I was the remote control. We didn't have a remote, so I was the guy. And the antenna man. I'm out there spinning it, trying to get. So we didn't do a lot of that. No video games, none of that stuff. So it was always outside. But when we'd sit at that dinner table, man, that's where we learned to tell stories. And Dad was just a great storyteller, man. He could just tell stories. And so I felt like most of the things I ended up doing in life it has to do with storytelling. It's a lot of telling stories. And so TV's just pretty much storytelling. The movie was storytelling. And then I end up, now mostly I go speak at places and tell stories. That's what I do. And then this book is about that. My chapter on storytelling is just find out what people's story is, John chapter 4, Jesus runs into a woman at a well, and it's somebody's not really supposed to be talking to, because she's a woman, he's a guy, and they're from different parts of the region, and he asked her, "Can I get a drink of water?" And which was a big deal, apparently. But it was such a simple question, So I think we overcomplicate things sometimes, and we think, "Oh, I don't know how to tell this." And well, if you can ask someone for a drink of water, that's where it can start. And so, and then he gets into her story, and she gives him part of the story. It's like a master class on how to talk to people. She gives him part of the story, but she doesn't give him the whole story, which is normal. She just met the guy. And he goes, "Go get your husband." And she's like, "I don't have a husband." He's like, "Oh, you actually had, a few husbands." And so
5 and living with the guy.
There you go. Well, and the thing is, the question is, why was Jesus pushing and leaning in on that? Because you kind of feel bad for her, like going, "Oh man," because I think he knew if she didn't deal with that, like if she doesn't deal with her story, she's never going to understand him. If she can't deal with where she's been, these are small towns, right? Even we're in Nashville, but it's amazing how small these towns are.
Yep.
If I got 4 or 5 marriages, probably everybody's going to know about it. And so he knew she was going to have to deal with this. And so she deals with it. Then she goes back into the village and she says, and this was so amazing to me. She says, "Y'all got to go meet this guy. He told me everything I've ever done." That should be a negative, but somehow it was a positive. And you know what I'm saying? Like I'd go and be like, "Watch out with this guy, man. He knows everything." He could just look at you and know what you've done. And so I saw that it was it seemed freeing for her. It seemed freeing that she was able to go like, "Hey, once it's out there," because that's kind of our stories, right? Once it's out there, it's like, "Hey, it's out there, man. This is who I am." And which is why I was glad Dad let us do that movie, because that was hard for him to go through. Memorialize the worst part of his life. Like kind of in Christianity, I guess in life, it's like, hey, move forward. The past is over, unless they make a movie about it. Now it's going to live forever. Everybody gets to watch it, and I know that was hard for him to go back and do that. But once it was out there, that was his story, and then the whole village ends up coming to know Jesus through this one woman. And it all started right there. And so it's kind of the deal. And so I think storytelling is interesting, and so I try to model that after Jesus and how he told stories, because pretty much that's what he did. Told stories, made analogies, looked like, hey, use things like the wind and trees and fish, it's like stuff that people can understand. And so that's what I was trying to do in the book, is break this down to be like, look, if you can talk about your spouse or your kids or whatever, then you can talk about this. And so you get better at it the more you talk, and but you got to care about people. I think when Jesus talked to the woman, he had already preached a lot to her just by asking her a question, because she probably wasn't used to that at all. And so a lot of people, you'll tell them a lot just by being kind to them and just by even wondering, about them. Because I see that a lot in our country, right? Like you go to these bigger places where like somebody falls over and dies and people just step over them and keep walking, And there's such a lack of caring for people. It's just like, we don't care.
It blows my mind. And/or they'll videotape it. Someone in duress.
Yeah.
I am not one I cannot stand back and watch something bad happen. I have to interject in some fashion and/or, or anything at that matter, like there's an issue that needs solved and everyone just stands around and waits for someone else to solve it. It's mind-boggling why people just don't interject themselves into this, sometimes difficult situation and help out.
Yeah. And in a way, that's kind of the book, but it's in a more of a spiritual way or having a conversation about it. But it's the same thing. Yeah. Like if I'm speaking to somebody, and this is not always strangers too. This some people are always like we got to go out and because that seems so weird to talk to complete strangers. Sometimes that happens, obviously, but a lot of this can start with people that we know. Like your family, your kids, your spouse, your uncles, aunts, the person you sit beside, you work with, and you see somebody going down a path, or you hear, as I talk about in the book, where you need to listen. Like you can just listen to people. The other day I was in the Atlanta airport, and this guy comes up and he's like, "Hey, I know who you are." I said, "Oh, cool." I was in like the Sky Club, and he goes, "Yeah, man, appreciate what all y'all do." I said, "Thank you, buddy, appreciate it." And he goes, "I ain't exactly living the way I'm supposed to." And so I stopped right there and I said, "Why would you say that?
Yeah.
Why would you say that to me?" He's like, "I don't know."
Reaching for help.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I said, "Well, have a seat. Well, let's find out what it is that, what's your thoughts on that?" We had a 30-minute conversation right there with a stranger. And so that was pretty obvious, right? When he said, "I don't think I'm living." Well, what would bring him to, and because that's not normal. That's not what, and all these stories start in different places. So, sometimes it's through pain, sometimes it's through fear, sometimes it's through something bad happened, and they can't explain, or it could be they're scared of dying. I've gotten, I talk about my friend Rick who called me and said, I just got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and he's 30-something years old. And well, right there, that guy's ready to hear something. And the reason he called me, I knew why he called me, because he said, "I know about, because now all of a sudden life got really short." Yeah. And so now he was one to hear. And so some of these conversations are quick. Some of them are really long. They're like decade. We'll take Marcus, for instance, Luttrell. I remember talking to Marcus so much about it. And he and Morgan both, their brains are they're like geniuses. The way they think. And most of the normal stuff I would try to convey it was just the way he viewed death and life and people and humans. It was different. It was different than anybody I've ever.
I have a couple questions about that
I've
later
ever
on.
run into. And but then he told me, and what he said, he called me. He said, I figured it out. It finally hit. And then he tried to explain to me to this day. I still can't. It was so deep and heavy. But what it was, how he got there. So anyway, I say that to say all stories are different. So I may tell somebody you could be part of a church and part of a community to help you in life, and that would be that's what I've been looking for. I can tell another person that, and they're going, "I hate the idea of that. I was hurt by a church when I was 12," and it could be real hurt, and that's how I would never step foot. And you're like, so it's all different. Stories are different and where they're at. The message is the same. Jesus is still Jesus, but there are different methods, I think, in how we do that. Paul was saying, "Pray for me that the mystery of the gospel can come out of my mouth more clearly." Why is he asking for prayer that the mystery of the gospel can come out of his mouth? He knew it better than anyone, because he knew some people were not obeying it. So I always think of it as more like, it's not science, man. I can tell you one person one thing and they can go, "I'm in." And I can tell another person another thing and go, "No way." And so then when Paul says this idea, I become all things to all men so that I can snatch some from the fire. So it's like, what does that look like in life? And, it's not being judgmental. It's being kind. It's showing you care. It's like you're getting yourself prepped up. And then another verse says, always be prepared to give an answer for the hope that you have. So always be prepared. So you know this from your career and what you've done. And I know this, whether it's hunting or cooking or whatever it is, preparation is a huge key,
Absolutely.
Like my wife, like she starts thinking about cooking when she's starving, and I'm like, that's your problem. It's too late. By the time you get to that point, I'm thinking about tomorrow's meal today, and I'm thinking, what do I need? What do I have to be prepared for? What will I need? I check what I've got. Hunting obviously is all about preparation, where I'm going to be, what the wind's going to be, what all this is. So it's about being prepared. So I want to be prepared to have a conversation with someone as much as I can. And so I got to know the word. And this is part of when you're telling other people, it helps you in so many other areas of your life. Like it helps me to study the Bible because I want to know. I don't want to have to call someone going, hey, I have no idea what this means. So I want to read it for myself. It helps me to be, I think the most important is it helps me not to just focus on myself.
Yep.
And I think that's probably one of the biggest problems with church people today. It's all inward, and especially now in this kind of time we're in, where even you go to a church and it's like a self-help thing. It's like, do this will help you out on your day. It's like a TED talk for, having a great week. And Jesus Christ was not about himself at all. He was like he came, like, I didn't come for me, I came for you. And so once we start thinking about other people, not thinking about ourselves, that will really help us to stay on a mission. And I see the mission as the Great Commission, which is Matthew 28. So I think that's so important. Jesus comes back to life. And I'm really interested, like, what did he say to go do? And he said, go, make disciples of all nations, baptize people, and teach people. Now, there's three things in a mission. Those are the three things. He didn't say, try to go to church whenever you can, try to be a good person, but I see a lot of people, that's the mission they live. They're trying to be a good person. They try to, and they're not anywhere near those three of making a disciple, baptizing people, teaching people.
I believe I fall in that category.
And that comes from, and if you're going to do that with other people, you're going to have to open your mouth and talk to somebody. There's no way you can pull those off without just, if you're just working on yourself constantly, like, well, I'm trying to read my Bible. Yeah. My question is, for what? For what purpose? I can gain from it, but also I'm like, how can I share this? So I think Jesus was all about that. When Zacchaeus, when he invites himself over to his house, and Zacchaeus just starts going, hey, I'll change everything, man. I'll start giving money away. And Jesus says, hey, this is salvation, come to this house. He goes, this is why I came, to seek and save what was lost. So it's another clue as to what exactly he was doing here. So I think when people become believers, I think a lot of times it's never even mentioned about going out after other people. That's not even said. It's like, you got it, you're in, and I think I say in the book, like, nobody told us that was part of the deal. What if it's the whole deal? What if the whole deal is about now? You got it, great. Now it's about going out. Because I certainly see forces of what I would say are darkness or certainly worldly. I see them actively trying to convert people to their cause. I mean, you name the issue, you name whatever weird, just watch the news, and it's like, it's going after children. It's going, it's playbooks that were started back in the 50s and 60s and 70s. Like, we will take over there. We will, we will keep recruiting people and get people into whatever it is. So that's where I think this battle is. And I think a lot of times Christians are just so far behind. We're just like, we're like sheep, all right? We're just like, bye. And then the world's just going boom, and you look up and your kid's gone, and your kid's off, doing all these things. You're like, what happened? What happened to, and this stuff gets lost, even society in America. It's not some guaranteed given thing, this is stuff you've got to fight for.
I have a question for you. So obviously you're a very well-known individual, and I'm sure you have tons of hunting buddies. Do you ever feel that there is a underlining reason or a different reason besides, hey, do you want to go hunting? Are they seeking out, knowledge? Are they seeking it out?
Could be.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to think about how the Holy Spirit works. So I don't know, and I'm not I even say in the book, like, I'm not some a professor of the Holy Spirit. I don't know what exactly why people come together. I do know. I mean, sometimes I look back and go, wow, that seemed weird that the timing was right. And there's been a lot of people converted at our hunting camp.
Hunting
and
camp.
I've been with some people that now. There's one time there's a guy. My dad was like, I can't believe you're hanging out with that guy. And I said, well, Dad, here's the way I see it. Either I'm going to become more like him, worldly, or he's going to become more like me, hopefully spiritual, or we'll have to separate because light and darkness can't hang out together. So we can at a time. I mean, I think Jesus was accused of most of the time of hanging out with the wrong people, right?
Yep.
And Jesus said, "This is the people I came." So I think if you feel those people, if you start turning into them, if I'm hanging out with a guy going, "Yeah, I want to be just like this guy," and he's so whatever it's his wealth or fame or whatever it is, because I've seen them all, and but I've noticed, like especially in our group, like you'll see even a whole group start moving more towards more of a spiritual line. Not that everybody's where they need to be, but again, this is a journey. It's not. I mentioned Marcus. When I first met Marcus, when he came back from overseas, just randomly met him. That was before Duck Dynasty, I believe.
2006.
Yeah. So this is way back, but I was just there. I was like, I'm gonna be here. I'm always just gonna try to be light, and we've been. That was before he got married, before kids, all this stuff, and so you see what can come out of that, more of this positive way, and a lot have, and I've several stories that are in the book or from hunting camp, a lot of them are actually through that because you spend a lot of time together, and but it's really wherever you're at, and so, but I try to. It's not, I'm not trying to be phony, but I am I'm looking for change. If it needs to be changed. Like Zacchaeus, like Jesus went over there and the guy changed. So he didn't go over just to hang out. And I think sometimes we hang out with people, we listen, probably good, but a lot of times we don't have any answers. And if you're just doing that all the time, you're just a sounding board with no answers. And so I do feel like that's that, when you get that last level of like, no, Acts chapter 2, Peter gets up. It's first gospel sermon. Peter gets up, preaches the gospel. When the people heard this, they were cut to the heart and said, what do we do? He says, repent, be baptized. 3,000 people came in. There's another verse there. Right then he goes, with many other words, he warned them and pleaded with them, save yourself from this corrupt generation. So it's okay to, if I see somebody just going down a path, I'm like, man, if you keep living like this, your life is gonna be miserable. The same way they're going down and fixing to careen off the side of a road that was not there anymore. Like, it's a warning and a pleading with them. And so it's not judging, but I think we can see things in our lives that maybe we've done ourselves, going like, man, I've been there. Be careful.
Which leads me to my next question, which would be broken propeller. So in chapter 3,
broke propeller.
Broke propeller. Yeah, I'd like to peel back that onion a little bit when because you talk about your success in Duck Dynasty and how you kind of went down a wrong path. If I read it correctly this morning, and then you remedied that situation.
Yeah, or it got remedied.
Yeah,
and that's the beauty, I think, of Christianity. Is what do you do when you're, I brought up Peter. Peter was in that chapter because that's the one I just told you. Peter in Acts chapter 2 did that. Peter in Acts chapter 1 was the one trying to replace Judas. Peter's like stepping up like a boss, in my Bible, I go about 2 pages before and there's Peter denying even knowing who Jesus was. That had to be like the cardinal sin. Like you said you didn't even know him, This is not the guy saying, yeah, I'm not married, and took his wedding ring off. This is you denying you even know who your spouse is. Like that's 10 years of counseling to get over that, I believe, from our perspective. Yeah, that's going to take a minute to get over. But Peter gets right back up and starts preaching. Jesus did give him a pep talk, but he gets right back up and starts preaching. So I think that's what holds a lot of us back. It almost held me back from even writing the book because I thought, I ain't the dude, man. I ain't the guy to... I want to share this, but oh man, I was, I've done some things that I'm certainly not proud of, and then boom, now I'm neutralized, and I'm not effective at all because I'm like, that's what held me back. When Jesus is like, that's what I came to take, and if I'm gonna take it, let me take it, and you go and you do what it is that you're called to do. And so, as I write about that, and it's never something I woke up and just said, I'm gonna just live for the world. Those things happen for me. It just happened slowly. It was just like a little bit off, and there was a lot of pressure. The fame and all that. It's there's no playbook. It's not like I mean, you just look up one day and everybody's. You're moving the needle in America in a giant way. I say America, I mean the world. Were you that famous that quickly? And so, there was a lot of burden, a lot of heavy lifting, because it wasn't just me, it was the whole family. And so I felt like I was the one who was having to, negotiate and spearhead and try to keep all the ducklings in line, like on this big mission, and so, and I talk about a fire that, it used to be like blazing, and now it felt like it was just cold. It was still warm under there, but so it's still there, and I still had a relationship with God, and but just wasn't on fire. And marriage was struggling. I mean, it was just a lot of, and then you're like, oh shoot, I'm gonna be just like all the other people in reality TV, like, and everything gets busted up. But hey, you gotta, I think the biblical way of that, is confess your sins and you'll be healed. 1 John, confess your sins. And so that's part of that, is just saying, hey, this is where I was, this is what I did, and repent, change, and change, and then, and start living in the light in a brighter way. And so, and time takes care of that as well. And,
I like that chapter the most, and I wish you would have went into a little bit more detail about your troubles. Not for like I want to read about this guy's life and how, the dynasty almost fell because, of he was indulging in X, Y, and Z. More so because it showed so much vulnerability. And with vulnerability, comes humility and relatability. And then I think, this is my personal perspective, which doesn't mean much, I think you could have captured more people. Granted, that's your personal stuff, but so many people can relate to that situation through a different lens, in a different avenue, not in like hey, I'm famous and now I'm, falling into X, Y, and Z, but they have their own things going on. And the moment, what I found, the moment you can show vulnerability, you can instantly relate to somebody,
right.
And then that's when the conversation really starts.
I thought about that a lot, and it's a good note. And at the end of the day, I thought, I don't want this book, I don't want all the headlines just to be about that, because then I'm taking away from the message I want to really get out, which is the message of Jesus. And so when you're famous, you can say things. So things were said to people that needed to be said, but it wasn't in a public way. And in some ways, I don't necessarily owe that to, a world of strangers I don't know, all the intimate details of my life. You're like, hey.
Makes too much sense,
So I think I wanted to show being vulnerable. What I was doing with that chapter is also, that's the way that I talk to people about the gospel. We talk about their story, and it's an intimate, hopefully, because if it's not, then I may not know a lot. It's just like the woman, she didn't give him the whole story. So when I'm, if we start talking initially, and let's say you were at my hunting camp and somebody said, hey, you may want to talk to that dude. And if I zero in on you, and we start talking, then I'll start listening. And so I'm trying to get to that story, and because I'm not going to judge it at all. I don't even know you. So, but we'll start talking, and then according to where that story goes and how much we get into it, and then I'm going to show you some of the scriptures in the Bible. We'll just put it up against those, and we'll see, like, how does your life measure up? Especially Galatians 5. That's where I usually start with people before I even start with the gospel.
Galatians
5.
With
Galatians 5:19. Okay. Yeah, it's the clearest line.
Tell me about that a little bit.
It's one of the clearest lines I can find in the New Testament. When I'm talking to someone, is like, does your life look like this, or does it look like this? And so he says, the acts of the sinful nature, or the acts of the flesh, there's many ways, but the acts of it are obvious. And then, so if you're bad, it's pretty obvious. And I thought that was cool how he says that, like it's obvious. Like, I'm not going around trying to find out, I'm not sure about you, I'm not sure what your beliefs are or whatever. No, these are people who are obviously, and then he gives you a list, and it's a pretty good list. It's like sexual morality, selfish ambition, lying, like fits of rage. And so, and then he says, and there's others, those who live like this, when your life is characterized by these things, you will not enter the kingdom of God. You're out. I'm not saying it. That's what the Bible says. So at this point, it's like, you can believe this or not. But the fruit of the Spirit, and especially in the beginning, I won't even get into the Spirit yet, but I'll say the fruit, what comes out of it, if your tree's if you're an apple tree, you're going to produce apples, is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control. Against such things there is no law. Those who belong to Christ Jesus have crucified the sinful nature, the one in the beginning, that's gone, and now you live like this. Clear line. So when I'm sitting down with someone, I go, which one do you think describes your life? The first list or the second list? It's just a simple way to think about it. And man, I've watched people just like grip on that and go like, how do you live? If we're not sure, another thing we can do is ask somebody that you hang out with all the time. Your spouse may be able to identify it really quickly.
Absolutely.
Your buddies may be able to. Sometimes we think we're something. Have you ever done that in life where you think you're something? Like, it's a bad place to be in. Like in my marriage, there's been times I'm like, how y'all doing? Like, we're doing great. And my wife said, no, we're not. And I'm like, I thought we were, and it's like, and that's been on both sides before. And so it's bad whenever we're doing something we can't even see. It's like, oh no. So sometimes I think we may not realize this is how we're living. Oftentimes I think we do. Sometimes when we just haven't thought about it. And so when I show someone that line, and so if I've got a piece of paper, like I'll do it on a whiteboard, I just draw a line, and I'll go like, which side of this do you think you're on?
That's one of my biggest fears, is to suck and not know it, and no one tells me that I'm sucking.
Yep.
Yeah.
It is. It's because we've all been there where it's like, you're like, oh no, did I, and so I draw that line. And then I try to think of like what analogy would make sense. And I think marriage is used in the New Testament a lot, even so much as he says the mystery of marriage is like the mystery of Christ and the church. And so like it's a mystery, like two become one. Like it's this weird thing that happens. If you're married, I think you get it, if you're not, I get, but it's such an understanding. And then there's a creation of things. And so if I were to ask someone, so just think about it like this. If I were to say, hey, are you married? Generally, people say, yeah, oh, how long? 8 years. Oh, it's awesome. Are you married? No, I'm not, or I used to be, or, I'm no longer married, or I'm still single, whatever. So it's pretty defined. But when I've asked people like, hey, do you have a relationship with Jesus Christ? I don't know. I hope so. I'm not sure. I haven't thought about that in a long time. Now think about if that were the answer to marriage.
Yeah.
Hey, are you married? Like, I don't know. I'm not sure. Like, I haven't thought about that in a long time. It's been a while since I may be married. I'm not sure. That would be so bizarre. But that's the exact answers that I hear a lot of times when I'm having this initial conversation with people about their story. And so once we get the line, once we and I'll jot down details of their story, just to try to help them figure it out. And again, I'm not judging. At the end of the day, I'm going to walk away going, look, I don't know if you think you figured something out, and then I'll start showing you some passages, and maybe you can glean from there. Another reason I'm doing that is because I'm trying to tie them to the Word. I'm not trying to tie them to Willie Robertson. I'm just a messenger, man. I'm a seed spreader. But if I can tie you to the Word, then if I never see you again for the rest of my life, at least you're tied there. We'll begin there. For a lot of people, it's the first time they've ever read the Bible and actually applied it to their life. Like they've sat in churches and they've heard preachers say stuff, or they can remember something grandma talked about, but they never really that they've never read it and said like, how would this apply to me? And it's because and a lot of people are so confused, and so you know how many passages I use with people when I'm talking? 7.
Really?
Generally 7 passages.
Okay.
I mean, I could give them more.
Yeah.
Like, but I can only take in like so much information, and I'm like, okay, I'm done. But it's usually 7 ways, you know. And if there's something weird or something they need to go into, I can try to help them down there. But generally, it's just 7, and I'm just at the beginning. I'm just trying to share it with them. I'm trying to get them maybe to start that relationship, and then they've got the rest of their lives to learn as much as they can. In some ways, it's like a doctor. Like, so you think about a doctor. Like a doctor knows this much information about diseases, and you know they've got all this knowledge. I mean, they can go down. Oh, this is what the word is this long, you know, and these are all the theories. And this is. I mean, they spent years studying this stuff, and then they have to practice just before they start really practicing. And now you come in. You know, here comes old Jimmy and Donna, and Jimmy's got a little pain here, and they've diagnosed it, and the doctor knows the giant parts of this. So think about the Bible. Think about how much you may know. Like, I know a lot. But I'm sitting here talking to him, and I go, well, here's the problem. Here's a way we can fix it. And if you want in, you can come in. And he either says yes or no. And if he says yes, he goes, all right, well, let's try it. Now, what's interesting, and then he tries to beat whatever the diagnosis is, whether it's cancer or whatever. Here's what's interesting. A year later, the knowledge he'll have about that thing will be so much greater. He will have read it, studied it. He will know other people. He will research all these things. You know, you'll become very proficient at what it is that you're trying to fight against. And so I think Christianity is the same way. You may come in just going like, I'm not sure I'm in this thing. And you know you've tied to the Bible, and then boom, you go out, and then you start what I would. At that point, you would become a disciple. You know, you're becoming a follower of Jesus and what all that means. And so, but, you know, if we don't have the initial conversation, if nobody ever tells him, you know, if he doesn't go to the doctor, he doesn't know what he has, you know. He's walking around with something growing inside of him that he has no idea. And so that's what I find. A lot of people are just lost, and they don't even know they're lost, you know. They're just trying to bounce around and do what the world's telling them to do. And they're, you know, some semblance of it. They may have seen other Christians before, and they're like, oh, I hate those people. They're awful. And they maybe they were, you know, maybe they were so judgmental. And
why do you think faith and disparity go hand in hand? You know, like the old adage, you'll never meet an atheist in a foxhole. You know, a lot of people turn, you know, to something bigger than themselves only in times of desperation, or that starts that relationship.
Well, I mean, perhaps because at the end, once you get towards the end of where you think you'll be gone, I guess you're thinking, is that it? And then I think you feel small, and perhaps you feel, you know, maybe without all the distractions of life, of what all the other things you saw, maybe there's a certain dissatisfaction that people have going like, oh no, you know, like I'm fixing to enter into something that I haven't, and maybe we just don't think about that. We don't think about what's next in life. And that's one of the books. That's one of the stories, one of my favorite stories in the book. I don't know if you've gotten that one yet, but Big Bill. Big Bill was a guy that I tried to study
when you were
with.
in New York in the car. Yeah, I got that far.
Yeah,
like I said, I read quite a bit.
That was one that I could not get through. This guy, like I kept, you know, super wealthy guy. Man, life on earth, good, good for him. Yeah, he got a plane. He's got like let's roll, you know. And he had some problems with his brain, some lesions on his brain. I thought, man, this dude's fixing to die. Like, I need to make sure he knows, you know. I got a sense he wasn't in the right relationship with God just from hanging out with him. I was like, phew. This dude would get after it, man. And I just thought, I just don't think he's. And so every time I try to talk to him, he'd be like, he who hath not sinned cast the first stone. That's what he said every time. It was kind of funny, but I was like, which meant
just giving you the stiff
here's what
arm.
that means.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear what you got to say. I was like, you know. And finally we were in New York, and we were in that car, man. He's over just burning heaters, man. He's just smoking like crazy. I look at that sucker. I said, Bill, how old are you? He said 58. And I said, I think you're going to be dead in 14 years. You're going to be dead. He just looked at me. His eyes were like, he's like, what? Or what the? And I said, I don't know, man. I'm just making a guess. But I said, have you thought about what's beyond this life? And back to your thing, he hadn't thought about it. Mm-hmm. Even though he had been like, he had brain surgery, he didn't want to think about it. Mm-hmm. It's like, life is good. And we were talking about money, and he was thinking about that a lot. But you know what he didn't say? He who had not sinned. We got off that. We got past that. And the question was, why did I keep coming after? It's kind of like Jesus with that woman at the well. I kept, because I could have just said, I tried, and he may have lost his soul in eternity. I thought, buddy, I brought it up 3 times to you, and you never wanted to hear it. It's your fault, and that's what you get. But I just kept trying. I just was like, here's one way. And I don't know where that came from. It's probably the Holy Spirit, just, to go that angle. So he's looking at me in this car, and he's like, I never thought about that. And I said, well, you may should start thinking about it. Mm-hmm. When you think about your life in the term of 14 years, I mean, that's just a good exercise for anyone. Yep. To be like, what if I only had, I think about that stuff all the time. Like, what if I only had 5 years to live? Like, would I be doing, what would I be doing? So we get back to the hotel, and he's like, will you come share more of that story with me? I said, yeah. So I'll go get my Bible and meet him in his hotel room. We walk in his room. He was shook up, man. He was like, he was thinking about it. And I gave him those 7 passages. I just started reading Galatians 5. That was one of them. Talked about his story. I said, what's your story? And so he told me. It was different, like, because I go through everybody's story, and so it's usually about where they found faith. And Bill's older. Generally, it's like, I was 6 years old. I was at I was at church, and everybody's walking down front, and I did it. And so my next question is usually, well, how's it been since then, man? Mm-hmm. That's where your life changed? Yep. That's where the old man died? Yep. Well, how's it been since then? A lot of times what I found is they can't find the new guy. Mm-hmm. Like we hit 13 and 16 and 21. The new guy, it's the old guy. It's the list of, it looks more like the first list. It doesn't look like the fruits of the Spirit. Mm-hmm. And so I've talked to people, I baptized a guy 94 years old one time. He couldn't find the new person. It was all the old. Like he could, but he had some experience when he was 7 years old. And that's a lot of stock to put in.
When
something.
You say they can't find the new person, they can't
tell me that where they can find where they ever lived like Jesus Christ.
Okay.
They can't find where you're supposed to be an ambassador for Jesus. You're supposed to have repented. Your fruits of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience. They can't seem to find where that ever, like something happened, some spiritual thing happened. And again, I ain't saying it didn't. I'm just saying if your life looks like those acts of the sinful nature, if that's the way you live, if you believe that scripture, that's, you're not, I told a guy the other day, I told that guy at the airport, I said, why is it that we think that we hope in heaven that our life looks different or it's talked about different than it is of how we're actually living it, And so I think we can kind of con ourselves and think, well, I'm a pretty good person. Because most people would say they're good people, right? Most people, like 9 out of 10 would say, I'm a good person, Then you ask their spouse, and they're like, good, So it's just trying to find that spot. And for Bill, he had a spiritual resume, but you know what he had? He had, as long as he could remember, his life just didn't, there was no fruit coming from that life. And so you're like, are you saying he wasn't saved? I don't know. I don't know. If I knew that, I'd probably be doing something different right now if I could see all this stuff. And so I read him the passages, and he stands up and he goes, I'm getting baptized in that hotel. I said, well, crap. It was like midnight. I was like, I don't know, we got to find some water here in Central Park or something. And he said, no, let's wait. And then we got back a month or 2 later at his house, and he had invited everybody he knew, man. It was awesome. And I'll let your readers read the book to find out how the story ends. It's so crazy how it ends. Like there was a lot of people.
I did not see it going that way.
Yeah, there was a lot of people coming in there. A lot of people found it that day. I still run into people who are like, I was there that day. I heard that. Because he gets out. He goes, Willie, tell them what you told me in that hotel room that night. Now, you got to remember.
And you told that to the whole crowd that was there.
Told to the whole crowd. You got to remember, that was after numerous attempts, numerous times I got shut down, numerous times he said, I don't want to hear nothing about this. And it was a night that was that conversation. So you got to think about it like that. Like it's a longer conversation. So it was well worth it. And then his whole family ended up obeying the gospel. And I've watched, and that's a generational change. That's a generational change that'll help the kids of the kids obviously, and then the grandkids. And so, because before it was just worldly. It was just very worldly. It was just, they were just living for the world and couldn't find the satisfaction, couldn't find what those things are. And so, and that's why I put it in the book. And, it's not that, he happened to be wealthy. It was just one part. Those people, I don't know. I like going after those people because, especially famous people and rich people, because they're harder, man. It's a harder person to
touching the untouchable.
If I can go to someone who's like, hey, there's eternity and it's going to be better than this life. A lot of people are going to go, I hope so, man. I'm interested.
Yeah.
But some people are like, better than this, it's pretty dang good here. And so those people can be hard. They can be more guarded. They can, it's harder to get to them. It's hard to hem them up, like just a one-on-one conversation, man. They got stuff in place that you just don't hardly get to them. And so, so I enjoy that. It's kind of a challenge. It's kind of like deer hunting. Because which is when Jesus called Peter, he said, follow me and I'm going to teach you how to fish for men. So isn't it funny? It's like it's the same thing. It's like you go after that and you learn, you get better. And, but that book, coming out with that book, man, that's what life is to me. That's what my whole goal is. And so this is why this one I'm super proud of. And you don't see other people's name on that book, like as far as helping write it, because this is one I wanted to put out and to say, man, this is what I think it's all about. And I've done a lot of stuff, a lot of cool stuff, and business and family, all kind of stuff. But that's it. And I feel like this time, man, I just see things going so south here, and people just hate each other, and no conversations whatsoever. People are kind of posting up together in their groups and getting real tribal, and and I think people are searching. People are searching for some answers, and I think the churches have done good in some ways and probably poor in some other ways. As far as official churches, that's what that looks like. Because this book is not a Sunday morning. This is not that. Whatever.
That's
happens.
what I like about it.
It's not that. This is Thursday night. This is Friday night. This is, and if we can ever get the church, like I was at a group recently. I was talking to this church. I said, I got these new products coming out for my optics, and I was in Mobile, Alabama. I said, look, if I'm in Mobile and I want to get the word out, and I pointed at that preacher, I said, would I have him talk about it, or you 1,500 talk about it? Which one would y'all take? 1,500 all day. So if I can get 1,500 people talking about the gospel and sharing their faith, way more effective than one guy.
Then you can make a change.
Well, yeah, you can. I think now you're starting to look at perhaps revival. And you've got to be around the world. You've got to be around worldly people. I think Christians have, they get hemmed up in these buildings together, and it's great. I love it. It's safe. It's, and they'll yell and scream about what's going on out there. But it's where this is where it actually, it's front lines work. This. Don't be offended, but I always want to be like a Navy SEAL, like spiritually like that. Yeah. Like I want to get dropped in. I want to look around and go, boy, I'm in like it's hard to get in this room, with certain people.
And I smell a gunfight. Let's go.
And I don't even want them knowing that I don't want people calling me Brother Willie. You know what I'm saying? They're just thinking, oh, it's some regular dude. And then boom, man, they turn around and then I'm right there ready to, because if you think about warfare and how it's fought, because you see the spiritual battle being talked about a lot of times it's people dropped into places, even to live amongst them and be with them and find out intel on this. It's not just always, it's rarely now where you line up and start shooting guns at each other, So a lot of this stuff is happening behind the scenes, and that's what the world has done as well. And so that's a different way of, so it's being prepared, it's being trained. It's like, man, if you put me in here in this situation, I may get bloodied up, but you get
to see what you're made of.
But I'm also I know the message that I want to try to get to. And if I can get that through to somebody, could be somebody's kid, could be, you get mamas and daddies, you get their sons and daughters, they start worrying about them committing suicide. I mean, these are heavy things, it's like that. It's like the only thing that may be left is like a life change.
So, I don't know if this is close to what, you and Marcus or Morgan talked about at all, but I'm just going to speak for myself. I'm not going to speak in generalities.
Bum yours in.
Yeah, please. Faith for me came later on in life, right? I looked at it through a negative lens when I was young and in the SEAL teams, and I looked at it through a lens of if someone's preaching, if they're speak about God all the time, it came with a level of distrust on my end. And the reason being is if we find ourselves where deep in the gray and a situation arises and it's going to test your morality, I'd rather have someone that is not going to question it, right? And then further on in guys' career or my career, you see a lot of guys think the opposite, right? And I don't know if that's I don't know why everyone else. I'm going to use myself. You find yourself in a dark spot, and then look at time. Time is limited. You've already escaped some very interested situations. So become thankful, but then you're not in the best mental space, and then at that point, along with for myself having some good mentors, that's when I realized God is real, and this is for me. I grew up going to church and so on and so forth, but it wasn't until I found myself in despair till I started truly praying and believe in God.
Right.
And why do you think, or what would you tell me as a young man with that line of thinking about guys that prayed all the time or preached the gospel and so on and so forth, and I didn't trust them?
Well, I mean, some of that is natural, and I'm probably for sure. I mean, I'm leery when people come up to me talking about spiritual things. Like I am. I'm a lot of the business deals I've had. Several of them went south, and they were ones, man. They started out, Brother Willie, man. We're on the same page, and then it end up, MF or Willie. I'm like, hey, what happened to Brother Willie? That kind of, even the language changed, of what kind of, and I think the Bible speaks to that too. It says, be careful, test this stuff, and there's wolves in sheep's clothing. And so, I think we do have to be cautious. Not everybody just claims that. So I'm saying it's okay to question that. However, I can't let someone else, and whatever version they do of it, it doesn't take away from what I believe or what I believe in the Bible. I mean, there's a little bit of independence there where it's like, I'm going to have to be responsible for my life, what I've done, who I am. And I don't think I'm going to get a chance to go like, well, wait a minute, that person influenced me to, because I didn't like the way they did it. Because other things in life I don't do that with. I can't blame, it's like I can't blame somebody else or go like, what, like you've got to figure it out. And so that's where it becomes, it's yours, you have to decide what you want to do. And I think Jesus was clear as I read through. He didn't tell soldiers to quit being soldiers. He didn't tell lawyers to quit being lawyers. He didn't, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like he didn't say like you have to stop. There's certain jobs that we have, and it's interesting. It's not, I mean, it's the nature of what the job is that we have to do what we have to do as a job, or what our calling is. And so, but you can have that relationship and know where you're at, and because your kids may not be that way. They may not be soldiers. They may not be whatever it is that you have to deal with. They may be different. And so, and that's where, I think we pass that on. So, but I think the people are right in sharing their faith. Because what happens is we start not, like we kind of bought into this thing where it's like, why don't you just keep that to yourself?
Yeah. 100%.
That should be your personal little. I don't even like the term personal relationship with Jesus. I hate that because I understand what they're saying, but if I said if you were asking me something, I say, hey, that's personal.
Yeah. Faith and politics. Don't talk about it.
You would probably be like, oh, we always said that's personal. That means don't talk about it. So if I say I have this personal relationship with Jesus, I don't want that to be misconstrued as I don't talk about it, because that's not the case. And so I think if we believe that, that's a great. What an effective way I think the enemy would have for us to say we can't talk about that. Well, of course, there's no way I cannot talk about that. That's how I live my whole life. It's why I think we're even in the position we're in. It's what saved our family. It's what kept our family together. It's like, all that's in there. So I'm going to have to talk about it. And if you don't want to talk about it, then don't talk to me. Plus, I'm not going to cheapen what Jesus Christ did. I'm not going to cheapen that down and not tell people about that, or say, you got to go up to where he was and say, I won't in on this. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You got to say, I'm ready, and I think Luke 14, I told you 7 passages, and Luke 14 is not one, but I do bring it up. It's the cost of being a disciple. Man, Jesus gives a hard teaching there. Like, actually, the word in the Bible says, hey, but it's actually just love less. You have to love Christ more than your wife and your mom and dad and kid. Like, it's got to be number one. That's what he's demanding. The military does that.
Yeah.
Like, there's no second. There's no like, you can kind of.
Oh, no.
You got to go. You know what I'm saying?
I remember when
because if you're going to go, you got to go. And Jesus Christ is the same way. If we're going to go, we're going to go. And so sometimes I see this little really watered down version of just just make a nod and you're I'm just like, I don't know if that's what I'm reading in the New Testament.
What advice? Because I'm asking this question because someone reached out to me last night, and it's someone I haven't spoke to in 15 years or so, and I think they're in a really hard spot, and so I'm going to stick to veterans in this case. What advice would you give to somebody that is having a hard time mentally and doesn't see a way out, and they're having deep, dark thoughts?
Back to the message of Jesus, I told you I started in Galatians 5. We talk about the sin. The next one I go to is 1 Corinthians 15, which is my favorite chapter. I love the way it starts. I love the way it ends. It's when the guy called me with pancreatic cancer. I went to the end of it, which is usually where I go. Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting? And I'm sure in the military it's the same way. Where like death is closer than, for most people. You realize it's there. It's for everybody, but I think when someone calls me, it's like, and Paul's saying at the end of that chapter, like, the sting of death is gone. This is the answer. If you want the answer to it, this is the answer. So then I go to the beginning of the chapter, and that one you got to know that, and that's where some of these other things come in. Where Paul says, he says, brothers, I want to remind you of the gospel. So it's at the end of the chapter, and I always thought, like, it's kind of weird. I wrote in the book about how important those first 4 verses are, even though it's at the end of a letter. But he says, I want to remind you. He goes back saying, don't forget, I want to remind you of the gospel, which you received and on which you have taken your stand. There's a different way to look at it. So how do you take your stand on the gospel? If you hold firmly to the word I preach you, otherwise you believed in vain. 2 negatives. Why are there 2 negatives there? If you hold firmly to the word I preach you, otherwise you believe this in vain. Is it possible that you could believe all this in vain? According to Paul, it is. According to Paul, we got people probably sitting in church buildings who they just believe this in vain. They're like, why not? Just in case. That's my little safety valve, And then he explained, and I didn't say what he says, this is of first importance. It's what saves you. And he says, Jesus died for your sins. He was buried and he was raised. That is the gospel. So when you're talking to your friend, I go back to the gospel. The power's in the gospel. Paul says in another passage, I'm not ashamed of the gospel, for it has the power of salvation. So it's not me at all. It's the power's there. So you just got to let that out, share that with people, and let it do what it does. It's the same way when we're talking about planting seeds. When I stick that seed in the ground, somebody's watering it and somebody, but it's just doing what it does, And so, and you're not really doing anything to, you can help that along, but it's growing. And so the power's in the gospel, and that's where it starts. And so, there's obviously other tools, and there's a lot of other things to help people, especially through trauma and damage and whatever it is, But it's not that the gospel needs some aids, but there definitely are some other things with compassion and with people talking through things, I mean, I've been to marriage counselors where my wife and I just could not get on the same page,
Yeah.
And this person really helped open up some ideas. We're like, oh, okay, I haven't thought about that. I just took a golf lesson before I came here, and we talked about breathing, and it was like some of these simple things, but sometimes we need that, right? Like we need somebody else just to go, look, because they can see what you're doing. They go, okay, I see, and so when you're talking to others, the message is in Jesus. If there's damage from the sin, Peter's pretty clear that just has to be repented. It just has to die. And then when I go to Romans 6, I jump over to Acts 2, which is the first gospel. Then I go to Romans 6, where Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15, Jesus died, he was buried, and he was raised. And then in Romans 6, Paul, same writer, is explaining baptism, and he does this most unique thing. He says, what shall we say then? Shall we go on sinning so that grace may increase? So the question is, well, if God's going to pay for our sins, let's just sin all we want to. So think about that in a marriage. Like let's say I had an affair and my wife, we got over it, and she's like, okay. It'd be like me saying, well, I guess I can just keep having affairs, right? Because you got over that one.
That's going to go well.
Maybe. Well, any normal person would say, no, that's not how that works. And so, and Paul says, by no means, we died to sin. We died to that. So now we have this debt. We died to that. How can we live in it any longer? Again, back to that living, how you live. Or don't you know that all of us who were baptized, you were baptized into his death. You were therefore buried with him in baptism into death, in order that just as Christ was raised from the dead through the glory of the Father, you too may live a new life. That's that new life I was talking about. Mm-hmm. Where's that new life? He says, you die, you're buried, and you're raised to a new person. The same exact thing he said in 1 Corinthians 15, what Jesus did. So now we're talking about, okay, so we got to do what Jesus did. We got to die. You've got to die. Mm-hmm. That old thing has to die. It's got to be gone. So if I go in with a cancer diagnosis, do they ever say, well, let's work with the cancer and let's let it grow and let's try to be healthy on the cancer's always going to take over, right? Mm-hmm. The cancer will win.
Absolutely.
So they're like, no, we're going to go in, we're going to cut it out, and then we're going to throw radiation at it, and we're going to obliterate, because if you have a tumor in your head, it's going to keep growing unless it just has to come out. So anytime you're dealing with sinful things, you can't work around it. You can never negotiate with sin. Mm-hmm. So let's say you're jealous. Like you're a really jealous guy. And like I was jealous in my life at a time, and we would always try to negotiate it with it. Like, okay, well, if you do this, I won't get jealous. It never works. It never works. You can't negotiate with this stuff.
Yeah.
If you're selfish,
that's a great analogy.
You can't negotiate with selfishness. Like you have to stop being selfish. That has to die. And you have to say, yeah, I used to be really selfish, or I used to be, fits of rage. It never works. You cannot just go tear up everything and throw a fit, You just got to stop doing that. Mm-hmm. And so it's the behavior I see with my kids, when they're 2, and I'm like, no, you're going to stop doing that. You won't be this. So we're doing all this training. It's the same way. And that's part of those 7 passages. So for your friend, you've got the answer. You've got Jesus is the answer. You've got the method, some responses I call it to the gospel. These are responses of when you hear it. Remember they said, what do we do? Mm-hmm. What do we do? We just heard that. It's cut us, like we want to be part of that. What do we do? And the first thing he says is repent, like change. Mm-hmm. Repentance is so huge. John the Baptist came through just teaching people to repent before Jesus even showed up. It's like, y'all got to get yourself right. Like you got to quit doing. So if I think about America, like there's a lot of things we just need to stop doing. And so for your friend, whatever it is on the simple things, that's got to end. Yeah. That's got to go, And there's such a release and a freedom from that, going, oh, I'm done with that, like that has just burdened me. The Bible calls it like a burden of sin, it just weighs on you. And so you're toting all that stuff around like you used to tote your gear around, And man, when you start shucking that stuff off, you can start moving, and then gear up another way. So that is the message that it goes for everybody, for wherever they're at. And so the question is, why did your friend call you? And that there was something happened. The timing was unique because it was right before you read the book. The timing's here. We're having a conversation
this happened
about
last
it.
night. Then
when you were getting prepared for this,
and then this morning, my daughter, I have a 4-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 7-year-old, 3 girls. And my youngest daughter walked down wearing. We just let them, get dressed and hope for the best. And she walked down with her gymnastics shirt on, and it's right down the road at Let It Shine Gymnastics, and it's a Christian-based gymnastics place. And I think it says Let It Shine Matthews, 5:1. I think I believe.
I think I'm not sure.
And then she comes on wearing that shirt, and I'm talking to you today. I'm like, well, this is a little too much right now. Like, this isn't just a coincidence, So
all these things are
just
lining
like
up.
your guy in the airport,
Yeah. These are just a couple. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
All the conversations around the world, and that's partly why I wrote the book, was just to get the thought process, so that for someone like you, number one, to inventory your own life and your own self and who you are and what you're doing and what all you're into. And then once you start thinking that way, and so then when you start getting prepared, you're like, man, it strengthens you. And so again, I think the strength that we're looking for comes from helping other people. Yeah. That really strengthens us. We've got it backwards, and we're trying to strengthen ourselves so that we can do something, but a lot of us, we just get so caught up in our own life that we're not helping other people. And so that's a great way. And if you have a way, if you're able to minister and plant a seed in that person, and then watching that person's life change, man, like, it's beyond drugs. It's beyond it's a high. It's like a man, because then there's depth. Then there's something you can be like, I want this mentioned at the old funeral. You know how many funerals I go to, and they talk about how they loved LSU football and Tennessee football, and man, they loved the Tennessee Titans, and they knew the whole. And I'm thinking, that's it. Your whole life and the whole 3 paragraphs are talking about some dumb sports team. I'm like, that's. I'm like, if that happens at my funeral, I would just like. And so it's not that we can't do great things in life. I think Christians have that backwards too. Like, so therefore we're like, we can't try to do anything great in our life. I think we should be the greatest of all kind of. We should have great podcasts. We should have great, careers and great, like I've done stuff in TV and done all kinds of stuff. But that's not the stuff that's, that I hope it won't get even mentioned. Like, I want to do so much for the kingdom of God. Like, I work for God. I work for Jesus. I mean, that's who I'm here on this earth. I'm still here. So just think about all the opportunities that I have. Like, people that are in heaven, they're not here. They can't, they're like, they're looking. And the Bible kind of mentions some of these stories, like, just like, go back and tell them, like, this stuff is real, it's like the knowledge of that. And so it's like, if we can live our lives like that, and I think I put that story in the book about my kid in 5th grade, and she's bawling, crying. She actually just graduated from college this past weekend, and she's bawling, crying over this assignment, and Corey comes in and says, Willie, you got to go help her with that, which was very unusual that I would help with the homework. And I go in there.
Same in my household.
So I read this thing, man. I don't have a clue. Like, I mean, I'm looking at it's Greek. I'm like,
you should see the math they're teaching
I'm like,
now.
this is in 5th grade. And I'm going, how would anybody know this? And it doesn't. So I put the assignment down. I said, look, Bella, here's the deal. This assignment doesn't matter. Who cares? I said, in fact, 5th grade doesn't matter. Like, in the grand scheme of life, 5th grade does not matter. So she's kind of like, what does that mean? I said, don't worry about any of it. So I'm like, that was a dad moment, Mom comes in. What did you just tell our daughter? I said, what do you mean? She said, she just said, you said 5th grade doesn't matter. I said, it doesn't, and I'm going to stand by that. She just graduated from college, so it actually worked. But it's me seeing what was beyond and knowing This really doesn't matter. So if we can see eternity, if we can see beyond this life, and if we can start living our lives like that, man, it'll help when because I feel like there's a lot of times I'm crying over some assignment in 5th grade in life. I'm like, this doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
This really doesn't matter.
You're right.
You know? When your friend called you, when y'all had to talk, that matters.
Yeah.
That matters. That's somebody reaching out, looking for a rope to grab a hold of, saying, you know, can you? And that's where I was when my propeller was broken. And because of my situation, because everybody knew who I was, it was really difficult to even find anybody to talk to. You know, it's like, I don't even know who to talk to, and I don't want this to be, you know, some
who did you turn
giant
to?
Story. I turned to God mostly. I mean, there's a lot of praying, a lot of listen to worship music. That was my little, because even church was weird. Like I go to church and everybody, it was just like it's like everybody's like, even the positiveness was, it's like, hey, Willie, it's like, it was kind of difficult. You just kind of felt like you're in a fishbowl and you just didn't want to, and I wasn't teaching as much. I wasn't telling anybody as much because I was just like, oh man, my propeller was broken. I was just floating around on the water, and I had a big boat, just didn't know where to push it, So I had to find that and then rebuild. So I had to die to some stuff. Repentance is not a one-time thing. Repentance is continual. Repentance continues you have to constantly repent. Peter followed Jesus, left everything he had. Unbelievable. But then he had to repent later of denying who he was. Declaring Jesus Christ is going to be the Lord of my life. That's not a one-time statement. It's a one-time statement that you make, but it's a continual statement that you're making, right? You're continually saying, you know why I don't do this, or you know why I am doing this, is because Jesus is Lord of my life. And people will see that, and you'll have fruit of that. And so these are things that are constantly, that's the beauty of Christianity. It's not over. It's not like, you didn't make it, you're out, You can continue to go. It's a growth. It's a journey. It's a growth. And Paul talks about that through the New Testament. Like I only give you milk, and now I can give you more food. And so we start growing. We get stronger. We get more mature. We get more experienced. To where if we go in the woods deer hunting, and if I've got you and you've never been, you're gonna look at me and go, like, wow. It's just I've done this a lot of times. Cooking. I use that cooking analogy. I love that. Because I could have been cooking a meal the whole time we're talking. I could have been cooking something. The only reason I can do that is because I've done it so many times. I don't. Now my wife starts cooking, it's like a disaster. She's fighting it. She's reading a box and smoke's rolling. And she's like, and because she doesn't do a lot, and she's
Are you the main cook in the house?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, I cook all the meals and love it. Love getting prepared. Love just creating stuff and. It's been because what I can create is growing up. We used to eat all our meals at the house, and it was a big thing on Duck Dynasty at the end. We had this family meal, and we said the prayer, and the prayer got a lot of the accolades, which is great. But, a lot of people would email and come up to me and say, we don't eat together. Like, we're so busy. We grab food here, and we never have a time to actually just sit and talk and have that. So it's like... And so I've been able to create that with my family. All my kids live right there beside us. So we eat meals together and we sit there and we're not on our phones and we just talk. We tell stories. And so I think that's important. It's important for the fabric of our families and
I
how
agree.
we live.
I completely agree. And, I try to implement that. I do implement it in my household. We sit down every evening and together and talk about, my kids are young, but the favorite part of their day, the worst part of the day, where they're looking forward to the week. And it's just a, great time to spend together and just,
these are great times.
Decompress.
These are great. These are times that your kids will remember. And there's times that I remember, it's just such a, the fabric of who we become. They seem kind of meaningless, but we start getting them into all these things and signing them up for everything. And I think these communities get together and say, this is how we're going to do it. We're going to play ball and we're going to do all this stuff. And you got to be careful, man, because you look up and it's gone. Yep. And then they're out. And you're like, I don't know if they really know what they need to know.
I had that thought. Was it yesterday? I was talking to Katie, my wife, about this. I said, my babies aren't babies anymore, and it's going to be, 10 years from now, my oldest is going to leave for college. Yeah. I'm already, dreading that day because I just love my kids more than anything on the face of this earth, so, but I really, really appreciate you coming on. I appreciate your
Thank you.
time, and more than anything, I appreciate your wisdom and your conversation, because I learned so much. And
thank you, man.
you're the type of person that, when people are around you, or a person like you, because I got people like you in my life, it just makes you want to become a better person, right then and right there on the spot. And so I'm glad you're doing what you're doing. And
Awesome.
Thank you for being here. And everyone, please go today and download, buy, however you want to obtain it, Gospeller.
Good deal, man. It was awesome talking to you.
Yes, sir.
Another great conversation, and we probably helped some people.
Yeah.
It helps people find some meaning and tackling this hard thing of life, man. It's tough.
It is.
It's tough.
It's a monster.
Yeah. We got to be lights, man. We got to be bright lights. It's dark out there. We got to be lights. So
That's a fact.
enjoyed it, buddy.
All right. Thank you, sir.
All right, man.